Well, now that we've reached this point in the build, we have the ribs, top and bottom spar, leading edge and the trailing edge all glued onto the wings, and they're in the halves. And what we want to do now is we're going to cut these pieces here that are outlined with the dotted lines. And these dotted lines right here create these pieces that are going to go on the back of the wing. They're going to go on the front of the wing. These are out of the 3/16 sheet. And then your little cap strips, which will go in between. I'll leave these long because I'll cut each one down to whatever length it is that I need. Now we go to assemble these onto the plane. And if you'll notice, these cap strips that are on the wing ribs are both top and bottom. They call for them here 3/32 by quarter balsa cap strips. Now they only go down to this rib here. From this rib, if you'll notice that the dotted lines are almost continuous through the center of the wing. So that means that this whole center section here is completely sheeted to this rib here, which of course is a mirror image of this rib. Right now, what we will do is we'll put on this cap, we'll put on this strip, and we'll put on these caps onto the ribs here, coming towards the end. After we join the wings together, we'll go ahead and sheet these areas. You can sheet them now if you want, up to you. I normally sheet all the way and then I join the centers at one time. Once the wings are joined with the proper dihedral, I go ahead and I glass the center section. Not a big deal, just some epoxy or CA and some nylon meshing that helps take the load, so that the load of the wings, when you're up there, like you get into trouble, your instructor grabs your radio and he has to give it a hard up to make it miss the ground. Well, the tension load here just gets incredibly strong. So you need to glass the centers of the two halves. One other thing that I'm going to do is on most modern airplanes, they go with an extra rib out on the, or not an extra rib, what's wrong with me? An extra bit of sheeting out here, and they actually put the servos out here to control the ailerons, so that you got one servo here, one here, in lieu of this 3/32 music wire. This is really old school. Back in the day, they used to run one servo because all we had are these big brick servos, and they were heavy. So they tried to keep the weight down by just using one. Now we have these little minis and sub-minis that we can stick out on the wings and just run the ailerons over and run them out and just put a Y harness to our receiver. So in essence, the airplane's seeing the same movements between the two ailerons. So this area right here, I will be putting an additional piece here with a cutout for my servo, and I'll show you that whenever we get there. Right now, though, we want to start gluing these pieces onto the top and the bottom of the wing so we can start the completion of our wing. Now, I started with this one here for the front, and if you'll look at it, I've left it short of the leading, but I went halfway to my spar. And the reason being is when I shape this front edge, like I showed you before, when I shape the front edge, all right, it's going to have a look something like this, okay? And then this top part with the sheeting on it, it'll come down and it'll look akin to that, so that we have a nice leading edge, so that it breaks the air really nice on the front of the airfoil. So let's go back and let's start gluing all these on. This one here will be flush with the back end. I normally take and I make the centers flush, let my extra run off on the back because I'll trim it later, and then get the top on here and here, glue these on. If you're using white glue, you're going to have to wet them. You're going to have to put them on, give them time to cure. If you're going to do the CA method, it's just tack it and go. Once this is all done, we'll come back and I'll show you what this wing looks like with both cap strips on it, and we'll get to the next step. Well, here's a trick that I use to get a nice leading edge set down that I'd like to share with you. When you're going to do this particular piece, it's rounded and the balsa is fairly stiff. But what I found is if you'll take your razor plane and about a 45-degree angle or so, remove the material off the leading edge of this piece. And what will happen here is that'll let you, when you go to set it down on your other mating piece of lumber for the leading edge, it'll give you a better fit before you bend it. Now, one of the other things is once you glue this down, this is rather hard to wrap. So what I found is I'm going to go soak this in hot water, get it really saturated. Then I'm going to glue it to that leading edge and let the glue dry a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and let it lay down. And when I get done, I get a nice fit like this. This one's already dried. And while I was doing this, I was thinking, well, you know, they're going to have this issue too. And if you try to force it down, what'll probably happen is it'll crack. And then, of course, you got to glue the crack, and it's a lot of sanding trying to make it smooth. So I thought I would take this moment to tell you this trick so that you get a nicer fitting edge. And it glues down really well to all your ribs. So let me stop there. Let me go wet my piece of wood, and we'll pick it up from there. All right, I'm gluing down the leading edge. I put down my glue. Another trick is to hold it down with a piece of straight balsa. Keep it pressure on it. Give the glue a little time to dry. And as you can see, I have wet that piece of wood, and it is soaking in. Now, some people will wet the wood overnight, making it more pliable. I only make it pliable enough for my what I need it to do. Now, by the time this glue dries here, another minute or so, I'm going to go ahead and put a bead across the top and down the sides. Then I'll go ahead and fold it and hold it down again until the glue has time to dry. One thing I did forget to mention, because I'm moving the servos, is I didn't put any holes in the ribs. So we're going to have to go back and cut either a square hole with an X-Acto knife or a drill bit, or we have to punch a hole in those ribs big enough to get the plug for the servo through. I found round holes work the best in case you have to feed a wire through them in order to get the plug back through. You'll find out about all that I'm talking about later. I'm probably scrambling a few things, but by the end of this series of videos, you should have a good idea of how this is going to transpire here. Now, I'm pretty happy with that. Now we come back. I run glue down on the inside of all of my ribs. You don't have to be really super quick, but you only have maybe 45 seconds or so to work with the glue before it starts to set. We're going down the ribs on the inside. I've noticed other scratch builders will use white glue for this stage, and they'll use the CA to do these edges here, because the CA will hold the wood in place while the white glue dries. They don't have to sit there and hold it. Once I've reached this point, we press it down. We give it a minute or so to set up and cure. And whenever this gets done, I will let it go. We will have our cap sheets on the front of the leading edge. Now, I did the other one the same way. We hold down pressure. You can use a piece of wood like I'm using. You can use a straight, whatever it is that you have. Wood is usually what you've ordered. It's just another piece of skin sheet here. And we're going to go ahead and let this set up. After it sets up again, I'm going to have to put the holes in there before I completely enclose the area here, because I've got to get the servo wires to where they'll come to the servo, which is going to be in this bay. And the holes have to be approximately that large for that wire to come through. Now, you can put the holes in it now and run you a piece of string through the holes. So in the future, whenever you're going to go ahead after covering to pull your connector through, your connector, your string will be in here for you to grab hold of, tie to the connector in, and then you can pull it through your holes. That'll give you a really heads up on trying to fight getting that wire back through there, which a lot of guys do, and I've done it myself. I mean, face it, you know, we got a lot of tricks. We know what we're kind of doing, but every plane's a new adventure. It's a new challenge. What I was really trying to show you here is these planes are not that hard to build. Once you have your kit cut, your actual build time, depending on your speed though, is usually never more than a couple of days. Then you have a day or two to cover it, and then your final installation of your servos and control surfaces. Then your airplane's ready to go out to the field and test fly. And from there, let's pause it till I get this done, and then we'll continue. Okay, now that we're back, what we're going to do is once you get the sheeting on the top and the bottom of your wing, and you've got it looking like so, I've added my wing tips. Okay, they're just a solid block. Now I'm wanting to fill in my gaps. Now as you can see, there'll be gaps because it doesn't fit exactly perfect no matter how hard you try. So what I found is this plastic wood that I purchased at Walmart. It's very inexpensive. It's very lightweight. You put it on. I use blank credit card type units. Again, you can get those at Walmart too. They got racks of them. And all it takes is just smearing the putty into the crack. Give it a little while to dry. You hit it with a sanding block. It's as smooth as it can be. Now my tube is old, so the bottom busted out. So I plan on using as much of it now here as I can before it goes bad. And we'll get all these gaps filled in. As soon as I get that done, while it's drying, I'm going to go ahead and drill my holes here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to enclose this area here, because I'm going to be putting my servos in here and running the wire over. And this servo will just make a direct connection to the back where the aileron is. So this one servo will control one aileron. A lot of the more modern airplanes are using 2 servos. The theory is one fails, you have another one. Hopefully it's enough to get you back on the ground safe. From there, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go ahead and finish filling this in, and we'll get back to this, and I'll show you what I've done. We have now the wing structures being put together, and I've got my cap strips put on. As you can see, the cap strips are coming on here. I also have my holes drilled into the end of the ribs. They come all the way through. This will be so when I encase this for a servo on the next video, we can do that. We can get the servos put in. We can put the ailerons on the back, and we can also join the 2 wing halves, and that'll be the wings, and then we're going to do the fuselage. So with that, that's a lot to kind of comprehend for a newcomer. Let me leave it right there, and this will be the end of part 2, and next we'll be starting part 3.